Welcome to AG Chronicle.
In 1805, one man stood as the master of Europe. From the fields of Italy to the plains of Austria, the armies of Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte seemed invincible. He dominated the land. But his ultimate prize, the complete conquest of Europe, lay just across a narrow strip of water, an island nation that defied him, Great Britain. Napoleon knew he could not march his Grande Armée across the sea. To invade, he first had to control it. And standing in his way were the wooden walls of England, the Royal Navy. The fate of the Napoleonic Wars, and indeed the future of the world, would be decided not by soldiers in a field, but by sailors on the waves. It would come down to a single, cataclysmic battle. This is the story of that battle, a clash of empires, a revolution in naval tactics, and the final glorious stand of the man Britain trusted to save it, Admiral Horatio Nelson. This is the story of Trafalgar. Napoleon's plan was characteristically audacious. He had assembled a massive invasion force, the Army of England, on the coast of France. All he needed was a few days of control over the English Channel. To achieve this, he ordered his French fleet, under the command of Admiral Villeneuve, to join with their Spanish allies, sail to the West Indies, and lure the British fleet into a futile chase across the Atlantic. Once the British were gone, the combined Franco-Spanish fleet would race back to Europe, seize the Channel, and the invasion would begin. The first part of the plan worked. Admiral Nelson, commanding the British Mediterranean fleet, took the bait and chased Villeneuve all the way to the Caribbean and back. But the British pursuit was so relentless, and Nelson's reputation so fearsome, that the cautious Villeneuve lost his nerve. Instead of making for the English Channel, he retreated to the safety of the port of Cadiz in Spain. The great invasion plan had failed. Napoleon was furious. He stripped the Army of England of its title and marched it east to fight the Austrians. To Admiral Villeneuve, he sent a final, humiliating order: leave port and engage the British fleet at any cost. Villeneuve, knowing his ships and crews were not ready, prepared to sail into what he believed was a suicide mission. For centuries, naval battles had been fought in a rigid, predictable way. Two opposing fleets would form long, parallel lines, a line of battle, and sail past each other, firing broadside after broadside. It was a contest of endurance, often ending in an indecisive slugfest where few ships were sunk. Horatio Nelson found this unacceptable. He wanted not just victory, but annihilation. During the long blockade of the French fleet, Nelson developed a radical new plan, one he called the Nelson Touch. He briefed it to his captains, ensuring every man knew his part in the coming chaos. The plan was to abandon the line of battle entirely. Instead, Nelson would divide his smaller British fleet into two columns and sail them directly at the long line of the enemy, hitting it perpendicularly. The goal was to punch through the enemy line in two places, shattering their formation. This would isolate the center and rear of the combined fleet, allowing the British to surround and destroy them with concentrated firepower before the ships at the front of the enemy line could even turn around to help. It was brilliant, and it was incredibly dangerous. The lead ships of each British column, including Nelson's own flagship HMS Victory, would have to endure the combined converging broadsides of multiple enemy ships for almost half an hour without being able to fire back effectively. It was a tactic that required immense nerve and supreme confidence in the gunnery and seamanship of his men. On the morning of October 21, 1805, off Cape Trafalgar on the coast of Spain, the moment arrived. The combined fleet of 33 French and Spanish ships of the line was sailing out of Cadiz. Nelson, with his 27 ships, moved to intercept. As the British fleet bore down on the enemy, Nelson ordered his famous signal to be flown from the masts of the Victory. Using a series of flags, he sent a message that would echo through history: England expects that every man will do his duty. A great cheer went up across the British fleet. The approach was agonizingly slow, the winds were light. For minutes that felt like an eternity, the two British columns sailed silently into the jaws of the enemy. Nelson, wearing his full-dress uniform, decorated with all his honors, was a conspicuous target on the quarterdeck of HMS Victory. His captains had begged him to cover them, but he refused. The combined fleet opened fire. Cannonballs ripped through the sails and smashed into the wooden hulls of the lead British ships. The HMS Royal Sovereign, leading the second column, and Nelson's HMS Victory took a terrible punishment. Still, they did not fire back. They held their course, their single goal to break the enemy line. At last, just after noon, HMS Victory crashed through the Franco-Spanish line, right behind Villeneuve's flagship, the Bucentaur. It unleashed a devastating double-shotted broadside from its cannons, raking the French ship from stern to bow, killing or wounding hundreds of men in a single thunderous blast. The battle had begun. The enemy line was shattered, and the elegant formation devolved into a chaotic, brutal brawl. This was the melee that Nelson had wanted. Small groups of ships, sometimes lashed together, firing their cannons at point-blank range, the air filled with the roar of cannon, the crack of splintering wood, and the screams of men. Nelson's tactic was working perfectly. The center of the combined fleet was being systematically dismantled. But on the deck of the Victory, locked in a deadly duel with the French ship Redoutable, disaster struck. A French sharpshooter, perched high in the rigging of the Redoutable, took aim at the decorated admiral. A musket ball struck Nelson in the shoulder, passed through his lung and lodged in his spine. He fell to the deck, mortally wounded. Nelson was carried below deck, but the battle he had engineered raged on. His captains, fully briefed on his plan, continued the fight with ruthless efficiency. The superior training and faster rate of fire of the British gun crews proved decisive. One by one, French and Spanish ships were battered into submission, dismasted, or forced to surrender. By late afternoon, the fighting was over. The result was one of the most one-sided victories in naval history. The combined fleet was annihilated. 22 of their ships were lost, captured, or destroyed. The British had not lost a single ship. Below the decks of the Victory, surrounded by the sounds of his triumph, Admiral Nelson died just as the last shots were being fired. His last words were, "Thank God I have done my duty." The Battle of Trafalgar was a crushing victory with a terrible price. It permanently ended Napoleon's ambition of invading Britain. It secured the Royal Navy's dominance of the world's oceans for more than a century, ushering in the era of Pax Britannica. And it immortalized Horatio Nelson as Britain's greatest and most beloved hero. It was a victory forged by tactical genius, paid for with incredible courage, and sealed with the ultimate sacrifice.